Join me on this riveting journey as I uncover the untold story of Kapitänleutnant Reinhard Hardegen and his U-123, a key player in this covert operation. Imagine the breathtaking sight of Manhattan's skyline through the eyes of a German submarine commander, navigating the Atlantic with the audacity to challenge the unprepared United States. In 1942, on a chilly January night, a sneaky German U-boat popped up in the lower bay of New York City without anyone noticing. Picture this: Kapitänleutnant Reinhard Hardegen, the commander, chilling on the bridge, checking out the bright skyline of Manhattan. Here's the twist. Even though the US had been in a month-long war, the East Coast was still shining like a diamond from New York to Miami. It was like America was living in its own bubble, oblivious to the global drama. But hold up, things were about to get real. U-123 was just one of 5 submarines gearing up for Operation Drumbeat, a crazy plan to take down the not-so-ready United States right at its doorstep. Brace yourself for a wave of terror along the East Coast, German U-boats lurking offshore, ready to pounce on merchant ships lit up like Christmas trees. And guess what? The terror was just getting started. Come springtime, these bad boys were going to be cruising the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, on the prowl like stealthy predators. The US Navy bigwigs knew for months that those sneaky U-boats might crash the American coastal waters party. But guess what? They just chilled and let Operation Drumbeat, aka the second happy time of the Kriegsmarine, go down as a gloomy episode in American naval history that could have totally been avoided. Now, let's rewind a bit. In the first couple of years of World War II, Admiral Karl Dönitz of the Kriegsmarine was dealing with some serious frustration. Picture this: only 46 working submarines, tons of mechanical headaches, and torpedoes that couldn't be trusted. But old Dönitz, the brain behind the Third Reich's U-boat squad, wasn't one to back down. Despite the scarcity, glitches, and dodgy torpedoes, he, being a hands-on leader, stayed tight with his U-boat crew and scored some surprisingly early victories. Back in the good old days from July to October 1940, German submariners were living it up during what they called the happy time. Dönitz's crews went wild, sinking 282 ships like it was nobody's business, a whopping 1.48 million tons of precious British shipping down the drain. After France took a nosedive, the Germans snagged 5 crucial seaports on the French Atlantic coast, giving them a front-row seat to the North Atlantic Ocean action. But hold up, here comes the plot twist. The US Navy entered the scene in fall 1941, thanks to President Franklin D. Roosevelt deciding to amp up support for struggling Great Britain in the Atlantic. Well, you can imagine Dönitz wasn't thrilled. He thought the US was breaking all the international law rules, so he tried to get Hitler's permission to attack the US fleet. But guess what? Hitler, hoping to keep America out of the war, slammed the brakes on that idea. On September 4th, things got real between a German U-boat and the USS Greer destroyer, and President Roosevelt was like, "Enough is enough," and gave the green light to shoot on sight. Fast forward to December 9th, 1941, and Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, the big boss of the Kriegsmarine, decided to go all out. He lifted all the restrictions on German naval attacks against American ships, both on the surface and underwater, even in the waters along the US East Coast. And get this, it happened just 2 days before the whole Pearl Harbor mess. Come New Year's Day in 1942, thanks to Admiral Dönitz's no-nonsense leadership, the U-boat force transformed into a seriously feared and battle-tested naval crew. They had a whopping 248 submarines and over 5 million tons of sunk shipping under their belt. But hold up, that wasn't enough for the Admiral. The guy was hungry for more, always wanting to up the ante. Dönitz was all about taking advantage of America's lack of prep. He figured, hey, not only can we mess with the shipping lanes in the Atlantic, but sinking US supply ships close to home? Now that's gonna hit 'em hard. So he puts on his thinking cap and starts cooking up what he dubs Operation Drumbeat, a plan to stir things up in the coastal waters of the good old US of A. He's dreaming big, wanting to roll out a bunch of long-range boats. Dude asks the higher-ups for a cool dozen models for the operation, but they throw him a curveball. Only 6 iron models and 12 smaller Type 7 ones. No worries, though. Dönitz works his magic and pulls together a small but mighty fleet for Drumbeat's first wave. He handpicks the Type 9 U-boat commanders, dishes out some top-secret strategic and tactical instructions, and boom, they're ready to rock this crucial mission. So, Admiral Dönitz was gearing up to send 6 big boats and a bunch of smaller ones to North America. But guess what? There was a sneaky submarine, U-653, led by Kapitänleutnant Reinhard Hardegen, pulling a fast one since mid-December. These guys were playing pretend in the mid-Atlantic, sending out loads of encrypted messages to fake a fearsome U-boat wolf pack. It was all a ruse to cover up the real deal. Other U-boats quietly making their way across the Atlantic to America. Now, by early January, this director dude, Roger Wynne, from the British Operational Intelligence Centre, wasn't falling for it. He saw through Dönitz's game of pretending with the fake Wolfpack messages. Suspecting that the German admiral was up to no good, like setting up a submarine patrol line or worse, planning an attack along the American coast, London's OIC kept shooting off top-secret reports to the US Navy, giving them the lowdown on the German U-boat force's known locations and activities. But here's where it gets messy. The US Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, was in total chaos after getting blindsided by Pearl Harbor. Over in Washington, D.C., it was like a maze of bureaucratic confusion and inner conflicts. Rear Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner, the big shot in charge of war plans, wasn't feeling the whole counterintelligence and espionage scene, so he was giving ONI the cold shoulder. Plus, Admiral Ernest J. King, running the US Navy's Atlantic Fleet, had some serious beef with everything British, thanks to World War I vibes. Long story short, the naval bigwigs on the US side ignored London's messages and even their own intel. Meanwhile, the U-boat pack was getting closer and closer. Talk about a sticky situation. Admiral Dönitz had his game plan, and by January 12th, 5 Operation Drumbeat U-boats rolled into their assigned patrol area. One of them, U-502, had to bail because of an oil leak. Tough luck. Now, these 5 bad boys had different target areas on their radar. We're talking the Outer Banks of North Carolina, off the coast from Cape Cod, the Virginia Capes, and the northeast Canadian coast. And let's not forget U-123, locked and loaded to mess with the coastline between Atlantic City, New Jersey, and Long Island, New York. Picture this. January 12th, the sun's setting after almost a month of travel, and the 52-man crew on the German U-boat is on high alert, ready for action. This 252-foot-long sub had some serious firepower, a 105mm deck gun, 3 smaller machine guns, and the real star of the show, 22 torpedoes to sink enemy ships. Now, here's the kicker. These guys weren't handed any fancy maps. Nope, Captain Hardegen relied on 2 tourist guides to New York City, one of them having a nifty harbor map. Just hours before, the lookout on U-123 spotted smoke on the horizon, and Hardegen was like, "Let's check it out." As they got closer, turns out it was a 10,000-ton British freighter called SS Cyclops, chugging along from the Far East to the British Isles. Without warning, U-123 let loose a torpedo, hitting the starboard side and creating a massive fireball. The Cyclops, settling in the water but still afloat, had her captain waving the white flag, ordering everyone to jump ship. Before hitting the lifeboats, the captain made sure the distress signal was sent, and they got an acknowledgement from a shore radio station. On U-123, the radioman was on it, telling Captain Hardegen that Cyclops was crying for help in Morse code. Seeing that the ship wasn't sinking like it was supposed to, From practically spitting distance, like only 650 yards away, he smacked the British ship with another torpedo, and bam, it split in two. Talk about a quick and brutal takedown. The SS Cyclops went straight to the ocean floor in just 4 minutes, and U-123 didn't stick around to play hero. No survivors on their agenda. Now, cue the Royal Canadian Navy getting wind of the SOS in Morse code. They sent out 2 minesweepers pronto, and the Royal Canadian Air Force scrambled an aircraft, hoping to spot that sneaky U-boat. But here's the kicker. The attack on Cyclops was just the kickoff. The German U-boats went on a spree, sinking a whopping 26 more ships in a little over a week. These bad boys cruised along the coast, chilling underwater during the day and popping up at night to pick off unsuspecting merchant vessels, all lit up by the lights of American cities. When word spread about this unexpected coastal blitzkrieg, the folks at London's Operational Intelligence Centre were fuming. They'd been waving red flags to the Americans, but it seemed like they were napping. According to this intelligence officer, Patrick Beasley, with the info we gave them, it's mind-boggling how the Americans were caught off guard. But here's the kicker. As the first wave of submarines sailed back to occupied France in February, Dönitz, the mastermind behind U-boat warfare, was loving it. In his log, he wrote that along the American coast, it was basically business as usual. No blackout, towns lit up like Christmas. Soon, he and his fellow officers would come to characterize the initial months of 1942 as the Kriegsmarine's second happy time. The era of silence. As the U-boats initiated their onslaught on East Coast shipping in mid-January 1942, senior officials in the United States Navy recognized that maintaining silence was futile. Too many ship sinkings were visible from American shores. Consequently, on Friday, January 23rd, a Navy spokesperson released a statement to the press. Numerous rumors and unofficial reports circulate about the capture or destruction of enemy submarines. Some recent intruders into our territorial waters will never experience the return leg of their journey. Furthermore, the percentage of one-way traffic is on the rise, while two-way traffic is notably decreasing. However, this declaration was far from accurate. The truth was that the first successful sinking of a German U-boat did not occur until April 14, 1942. By that time, the submarines had already sunk more than 48 ships, steadily advancing southward. Although the responsibility lay with Admiral King, his attention remained absorbed by the Japanese onslaught in the Pacific. Furthermore, following the events at Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt implemented a stringent censorship policy. Any disclosure of information regarding the movements of military branches was strictly prohibited unless officially released by government authorities. This initiative aimed to safeguard crucial military intelligence as the armed forces braced for what they accurately foresaw as a prolonged and arduous conflict. While effective in its intended purpose, this censorship also functioned as a convenient cover for the US Navy, concealing its glaring unpreparedness for the sudden surge in U-boat activities. This allowed them to manipulate public perception despite the harsh realities. Consequently, confusion and uncertainty heightened the chaos in the naval war. The devastating onslaught persisted almost daily for months to come. Learning curve. At the same time, the second batch of Type 9 boats reached North American waters, and the third, Operation Newland, positioned itself in the patrol area off Caribbean oil ports. With a surplus of Allied ships and all long-range U-boats already engaged, Dönitz decided to deploy more shorter-range Type 7s to the US East Coast. To optimize space within the already compact vessels, some submarines even filled their freshwater tanks with diesel oil. The U-boats traversed the Atlantic at low speeds, using a single engine to conserve fuel. As time passed and the challenge of finding or attacking targets intensified, the U-boats shifted from the US coast to the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and eventually, by late summer, off the South American coast. From a peak of 6 large U-boats patrolling in the Gulf on July 16th, the number dwindled to just 1 or 2 for the rest of the season. However, Admiral Karl Dönitz and his staff's conclusion that the increasing risks made the attacks no longer cost-effective did not signal the end of the U-boat war. Instead, it shifted to other maritime theaters. After 17 weeks of maritime turmoil, often called America's second Pearl Harbor, the 1942 U-boat offensive in the Gulf concluded on September 5th. During this unrestrained period of Kriegsmarine Wolfpack dominance, nearly 400 ships were lost. Following this, the US Navy and Army Air Forces faced the formidable challenge of navigating a steep learning curve. With gradual progress, they acquired effective anti-submarine warfare tactics. Even after 80 years, historians continue to ponder why Fleet Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Ernest J. King, did not respond promptly to the clearly identified threat posed by the incoming U-boats. Ultimately, Admiral King adhered to his philosophy. Don't tell them anything. When it's over, tell them who won.